Let's get right to it. The word cuckold has a pretty simple old-school definition. It traditionally refers to a man whose wife is cheating on him. He is the one being made a fool of, at least according to society's outdated rulebook. The term focuses entirely on the man's perceived shame and humiliation. It implies he's somehow less of a man because his partner sought intimacy elsewhere. This isn't just about infidelity. It's about a specific kind of public or private embarrassment tied to a man's role as a husband. The word itself carries the weight of centuries of judgment and social expectations about what a marriage should look like. The core idea is one of betrayal, but it's framed in a uniquely gendered way. Notice there isn't a common, equally loaded term for a woman whose husband cheats. The focus has always been on the man's failure to control his wife or to satisfy her, placing the blame and the shame squarely on his shoulders. This framing reveals a lot more about historical views on marriage and property than it does about the complexities of human relationships. It paints a picture where a wife's fidelity is a measure of her husband's status, which is a frankly ridiculous and patriarchal concept that has thankfully started to crumble in modern times. Historically, the cuckold was a figure of ridicule. He was the butt of jokes in plays, poems, and village gossip. Think of Shakespearean comedies where a bumbling husband is blissfully unaware that his wife is having an affair with a witty, charming suitor. The audience is in on the secret, and the humor comes from his ignorance. This character was a stock figure, a social archetype meant to warn men about the dangers of a wandering wife and the importance of maintaining household authority. The label was a social weapon designed to enforce a rigid code of marital conduct and male dominance, making it a powerful tool for social control. So, in its original sense, being a cuckold wasn't a choice. It was something that happened to a man, a mark of shame that he was expected to bear. The emotional landscape was supposed to be one of anger, jealousy, and a sense of profound loss. It was a private pain made public, a personal failure displayed for all to see. The term was never neutral, it was an insult, a verbal punch designed to diminish a man's standing in his community. Understanding this original meaning is crucial to appreciating just how dramatically the concept has been reinterpreted and reclaimed in the contemporary world. The origin of the word cuckold is actually for the birds, literally. It comes from the cuckoo bird, which has some rather sneaky nesting habits. The female cuckoo lays her eggs in the nests of other unsuspecting birds. The poor clueless host bird then ends up raising the cuckoo's chick as its own, often at the expense of its actual offspring. The cuckoo chick is bigger, louder, and more demanding, tricking its foster parents into feeding it while their own babies may starve. This natural parallel was too good for people to pass up, creating a perfect metaphor for a man unknowingly raising another man's child. This bird-based insult took root in the French language as cocu, which then hopped over the English Channel around the 13th century to become cuckold. For centuries, it remained a potent and popular term. You can't read through Chaucer or Shakespeare without tripping over it. The symbol often associated with the cuckold was a pair of horns. A man who had been cuckolded was said to be wearing the horns. This imagery was everywhere in medieval and Renaissance art and literature, a visual shorthand that everyone immediately understood. It was a mark of shame, a sign that the man was a failure in his primary domestic duty. The word's power came from the social and legal importance placed on paternity. In a time before DNA tests, ensuring that a man's heir was biologically his was a massive deal. Property, titles, and fortunes were all passed down through the male line. A wife's infidelity wasn't just a personal betrayal, it was a direct threat to the entire system of inheritance and social order. This made the cuckold not just a fool, but a danger to the stability of the family line. The word was less about love and more about lineage, property, and the patriarchal anxiety of being tricked into leaving your castle to the milkman's son. Over time, as societies evolved, the word's legal and economic sting began to fade, but its social stigma remained sharp. The Industrial Revolution and the rise of the middle class shifted family dynamics, but the idea of the cuckold as a pathetic comical figure persisted. He became a staple of vaudeville jokes, early films, and bawdy stories. He was the guy who came home early from a business trip to find a hat on his coat rack that wasn't his. The focus remained on his humiliation, a testament to how deeply embedded these ideas about male pride and female fidelity were in Western culture. In the late 20th and early 21st centuries, something fascinating happened. The internet and a more open conversation about sexuality allowed people to connect and explore niche interests. It was in this environment that the word cuckold began a radical transformation. What was once a pure insult started to be reclaimed as a consensual sexual fantasy, or kink. The term evolved to describe a specific type of erotic role play within a couple. In this new context, the husband is not an unwitting victim, but an enthusiastic and willing participant in his wife's encounters with other partners. This modern redefinition flips the old meaning on its head. Instead of shame, the man in this scenario, often called a cuck, derives pleasure from his partner's pleasure. The dynamic is no longer about his humiliation, but about a unique form of intimacy and trust. For many couples who explore this, it involves something called compersion, which is the feeling of joy one gets from seeing their partner happy with someone else. The husband's role is often one of support, watching, or simply knowing that his wife is having a fulfilling experience that they have both agreed upon. The focus shifts from male ownership to shared erotic exploration. The key difference here is consent. The old cuckold was deceived. The modern cuck is in on it. In fact, he may have planned the whole thing. This changes everything. The power dynamic is completely different. Instead of the wife acting against her husband, she is acting with him to explore a shared fantasy. This can be an incredibly intimate and trust-building exercise for some couples, requiring immense communication, security, and a rejection of traditional jealousy. It becomes a testament to the strength of their bond rather than a sign of its failure, challenging everything the old word stood for. Of course, the term has also been co-opted in another, far less interesting way. In recent years, the political far right has weaponized the word cuck, short for cuckservative, as a general-purpose insult. They use it to attack men they see as weak, effeminate, or compromising their principles. This political usage tries to drag the word back to its roots of shame and failed masculinity. It's an attempt to insult someone by questioning their strength and dominance. This creates a strange cultural split, where the same word is being used as a term of pride in one community and a juvenile insult in another. The reason this topic remains so compelling is that it pokes at our most deeply ingrained ideas about love, jealousy, and monogamy. Mainstream culture is fascinated by it. You see storylines involving cuckolding, both the classic and modern varieties, in movies and prestige television shows all the time. Shows like Billions or The White Lotus have explored these complex dynamics, moving beyond the simple joke and digging into the psychological and relational complexities. It's a dramatic goldmine because it forces characters and the audience to confront uncomfortable questions about what they want and expect from a relationship. Different people have vastly different opinions on the subject, and that's putting it mildly. For those who practice consensual non-monogamy or are part of the kink community, cuckolding can be a positive and empowering label. They see it as a healthy, communicative way to explore sexuality and strengthen a relationship by moving beyond possessiveness. For them, it represents ultimate trust. It's about finding pleasure in a partner's freedom and happiness, which they would argue is a more evolved form of love than the one demanded by traditional rigid monogamy. It's a celebration of intimacy on their own terms. On the other hand, many people find the entire concept, even the consensual version, to be deeply unsettling or morally wrong. From a more traditional or conservative viewpoint, it can be seen as a perversion of the marriage vows and a breakdown of commitment. They might argue that inviting jealousy and outside partners into a relationship is inherently destructive, regardless of consent. For these critics, the practice is a sign of emotional damage or a lack of self-respect, echoing the shame of the word's original meaning. They can't separate the act from the historical baggage of humiliation and betrayal. Ultimately, the journey of the word cuckold from a bird's nest to a political insult to a consensual kink is a story about us. It shows how our ideas about relationships, gender roles, and power are constantly in flux. What was once a clear-cut insult used to enforce social norms has become a deeply personal and often controversial term. Whether viewed as a shameful secret, a political jab, or a shared joy, the concept forces a conversation about the boundaries of love and the nature of desire. And that's a conversation that will probably never go out of style.